I strained my neck looking up at the towering shelf. It held all of my brother's awards. Holding my neck in pain, I was now eye level with the lower shelf, which had photos of him wearing his form-fitting statement bright green trench coat. He smiled so bright, his teeth was almost as shiny as that big trophy he was holding. I stood up looking at the one empty spot between the massive amounts of awards. In that one spot was a layer of dust. Looking down at my fingers still sore from playing the piano all day, I closed my eyes and thought of that feeling, the feeling of a heavy amount of purpose in my arms. A shiny golden trophy of mine will be displayed on that shelf, for my parents to fonder over and pat on my back in praise. The competition is tomorrow. I will play a grand song for all those judges to hear and pick apart. They were trained to point out flaws, so I would have to be perfect. I sat down and continued practicing the song, my fingers flowing across the keys, each sound coming together with such purpose. Then my hand froze, unsure of what key was next. My head was filling with all the thoughts of my parents' disappointed words. I could smell my own fear leaking out from under my arms. I stood up. There is one thing that will for sure improve my skills. Walking down the thin hallway, I grabbed my brother's coat and looked in the mirror. Putting my arms through the sleeves, I felt a wave of confidence wash over me. I straightened up my back and put on a smile. The sleeves draped past my fingertips. The way it fit my body looked like I had shrunken in the wash instead of the coat. But I didn't care. I believed that this was the source of my brother's skills. He wore it to every competition. It shined with greatness. It seemed as though it was stitched with talent. Once he grew out of it, I inherited the masterpiece. I know it will bring me good luck. Striking a confident pose, my jaw dropped. There were 2 dark patches of sweat in my armpits. Horror racing through my bones, my legs shook. Oh no, sweat will for sure dampen its abilities. My face grew pale. My brother didn't want me to wear it in the first place. He said one day his kids would be so lucky to wear it. The fine quality of the material couldn't be thrown into the wash and get bashed around a rusty washing machine at home. It needed to be gently washed with the finest soap, with such care and love to bring it back to its full glory. Looking down at my watch, I only had a few hours before the dry cleaners close. My parents weren't home, so my only choice was to walk. I marched out the door with my green coat. I tried to tap into its powers to calm me down, but the stench got in my way. I could put the coat in a bag, but wrinkling it up would cause far too much damage. I went to the one place that would always clean my brother's special coat, although it had been years since it was last cleaned because he moved to college. Walking down a familiar path brought back memories of my brother looking confident and tall. It's like nothing in his tracks ever got in his way. He would go to many competitions, winning all of them. When he would walk on that stage, he acted like no one else even had a chance to win. I only wish I got that gene from my family. Holding my head down in thought, looking at the concrete, feeling my nerves dance around my stomach, I could almost see it. I could almost see the big trophy handed to someone else, someone who didn't understand how much I needed it. As I wandered in my thoughts, the ground started to grow uneven. Plants were stretching across the path. I looked up and my heart sank. I smelt the damp air of the rotting buildings. The sight of the plants taking residence at the old dry cleaners in the distance burdened me. It felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared. I slumped to the ground, hugging my knees. The dry cleaners were out of business, and they have been for quite some time. Had it taken me this long to wear the coat? I was afraid of wrecking it, so I waited until my big day, the day when my brother would come and see me perform for the first time wearing his beloved coat and playing a beautiful tune for his presence. As I soaked in my sadness, a sweet voice called from the shadow. Crunching of bags followed her. I turned around and saw cats rubbing against her legs and meowing softly. "Are you all right?" she said, her young eyes staring at me. "Not quite. My once chance at getting a trophy is for sure gone." "And why is that?" her sweet voice replied. "My coat is stained from fear. It won't be able to perform." "Your fancy coat has stage fright?" she laughed, trying to lighten the mood. I didn't reply. Instead, I shot her a look of terror. She placed out pieces of materials for the cats to sleep upon. "Why are you feeding those stray cats?" I asked. "Because I like to," she smiled bright. "You don't get paid?" Nope, just these sweet cuddles. I come out here 3 times a day to feed them. A dusty cat fell asleep in her arms. A crowd of cats sat around her. They all depended on her. She is an odd one, that girl. She wore dust and dirt from all the cats all over her face. A thick layer of multicolored cat fur stuck to her clothes. I held my arms crossed so it hid the dreadful stains on my coat. If you want, I can throw that tallatin coat of yours in my next load of rags. The hairs on my neck stuck up, and my whole body trembled with the thought of my coat being mixed up with what was ever in those rags. I would rather wear the dirty coat. So, I did. Standing up, I dragged my legs back home. The next day, I stood at the sides of the stage, feeling defeated. Every cell in my body wanted to run away. I still wore the green coat, to maybe convince myself it still worked. As long as I looked at that trophy, it grounded my feet right in place. It was my turn, my time to show how hard I worked for this. Looking out at the panel of judges, each face was like a shark, and I was just a little fish in the wide sea of contestants. Sitting down on the stool, the stench of my fare leaving a cloud around me. My fingers hovering over the keys, I couldn't play. That girl was stuck in my head. She worked so hard and had nothing to show for it, except a few old cats. And yet, she still had a smile. Looking at my reflection in the shiny piano, I didn't like who I saw. I can't remember the last time I smiled that was genuinely happy. She didn't feed those cats because she had to. She did it because she wanted to. The crowd whispering hushed tones weakened that once fire I had held for that trophy. Did I want to do this? The stench lingering off me answered that question, but I couldn't give up. I still had to do this, but not for my parents, nor my brother. So, I played, fingers flowing, dancing across the keys. My whole body was one with the music. I finished. Standing up, I walked off, not looking at that big trophy. It just looked like an empty shell now. I no longer got that spark when I had looked at it, and yet I felt like I was lit up with joy. Standing on the sidelines smiling, I didn't care if I won anymore, because I did something better. I played for myself.